Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome back to the webinar series on opportunities in bioengineering. And today we'll be talking about food biotechnology. So the two people who are joining us today are Dr. T. Chakradhar from the Technology think Tank of India, TIFAC. And the other person who is joining us today is Mr. Varun Deshpande, who is the Managing Director of Good Food Institute India. Welcome, Varun and Dr. Chakradhar. All right, I think we have lost connection with Dr. Chakradhar. Anyway, so we should be able to join him soon. Maybe then, okay, he's back. All right, good. Sorry. Okay, sorry, some technical issues. So welcome, Dr. Chakradhar. I just introduced you. Sorry, I think you had lost the signal meanwhile. I will introduce him again. So Dr. Chakradhar is a scientist in the technology think tank TIFAC. Welcome, Dr. Chakradhar. So it's a pleasure to have both of you around. Since both of you are working in food biotechnology, I think Dr. Chakradhar has been working in the field since very long time now. So maybe it would be a great time to actually start the interaction with Dr. Chakradhar. And so, Dr. Chakradhar, you have worked on the document Technology Vision 2035, in which you contributed in the food and agriculture sector about the prediction in this field for the next 20 years when it was being written. So that was being written in 2015. So that was 20 years. Now 15 more years to go about the predictions that you had made at that point. So could you please highlight some of these new technologies that you predicted at that time that would be important for the food biotechnology sector?
Yeah, definitely. It was a tremendous experience working with this Technology Vision 2035. And for that, can I make a presentation of 10 minutes or so?
Sure, sir. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So maybe you can share your screen and then we can put the presentation live.
Has it my screen shared?
No, not yet.
Now?
Not yet. Yeah, now we see your screen.
Yeah. Is it fine? Full screen mode?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, thanks DYPIU for giving me this opportunity, especially Professor Ranjan, who was my previous boss. And this technology vision exercise was a national level exercise, which was started in 2011. So I'll just briefly cover what are the aspects and means what it includes basically, but my focus would be on food and agriculture and towards food biotechnology as per the theme. So first, let me introduce about TIFAC. It's an autonomous organization under Department of Science and Technology established in 1988. And the organization was mandated to be India's technology think tank that keeps an eye on future technology trends and delineate technology trajectories for the nation. And the TIFAC is governed by an eminent experts from government, R&D institutions, academia, and industry. And presently, Professor Dr. V.K. Saraswat, who is also a member of Niti Aayog, is chairing the council. And I take privilege, always all TIFAC people will take privilege in mentioning that the then president, Dr. Kalam, was also former chairman of TIFAC. And broadly, the TIFAC works in the area of technology foresight, which includes visioning, road mapping, horizon scanning, technology assessment, techno-market survey reports, and also we have got a good patent facilitation center which nurtures innovation and industry support. And we have a couple of international linkages. So now I coming back to the what made us to do this exercise after commending the Technology Vision 2020 way back, maybe 10 years back. So in response to the major changes in the economic situation, geopolitical and technology domain at global level in the last 2 decades, TIFAC presented a fresh perspective on technology imperatives for India as a Technology Vision 2035 document. The document was prepared in a consultative framework and is being placed as a referential document to inspire all stakeholders to take actions in different sectors. It roots itself in the collective aspirations of the people of India, the ambitions of youth, and the likely expectations of Indians in 2035. So TIFAC initiated this exercise in January 2011 under the guidance of our former chairman, Dr. Anil Kakorkar, who was also the former Atomic Energy Commission chairman. And when Professor Ranjan, who is presently VC of DYPIU, was at the helm of affairs in TIFAC. The document was released by Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji in January 2016 in the 103rd session of Indian Science Congress held at Mysore. Mainly, the objectives of this document were to articulate a vision for all Indians in 2035 and to delineate technology trajectories for bringing the vision to realization. So broadly, it covers the retrospection of what we have done, the earlier vision technology 20 to technology vision 2020, and Indians in 2035. What segments of Indian would be there in 2035? Different groups have been segregated, and the vision statement, which is one of the strongest vision statement which we come across during our technology domain, and Lifescape 2035, which gives a picture of 2035, how it would look like, and also prerogatives and enabling technologies, essential prerequisite. And apart from that, we have identified some grand challenges which the country should attain by 2035. And the call to action means who will be doing the findings which have been delineated in this document. And the Technoscape, these are the technology roadmaps, offshoot of this Technology Vision 2035. So coming back to the vision statement, technology in the service of India, ensuring the security, enhancing the prosperity, and strengthening the identity of every Indian. This is not a vision for all Indians in 2035 per se. Rather, it is a vision where our country and compatriots should be in 2035 and how the technology would bring this vision into fruition. So in Technology Vision 2035, it was projected that by 2035, India's population would be around 1.53 billion. The vision document focuses upon needs of the Indians in 2035. It analyzes the basic needs, that is security, prosperity, and identity of various segments of our population in 2035, and proposes multiple ways in which the relationship between their needs to be emphasized. So the TV 2035 document identifies 12 prerogatives of all Indians in 2035 that emanate from this vision. Means every Indian should have these prerogatives. And these are linked to basic needs and can be expressed as specific targets, starting with the most elemental, that is the individual prerogatives, and where food and nutritional security is one of the important component. And also there are certain collective prerogatives like safety, speedy mobility, public safety, and national security, cultural diversity, and all those things. And coming back to the food and nutritional security, it also put forth certain targets. So in that, every citizen should be healthy and intellectually sound. Means the Indian should be assured of adequate and nutritional food intake, that is in terms of calorie, protein, irrespective of the diverse food habits we have, and the availability of micronutrients, proteins, malnutrition, means eliminate the hidden hunger, and the zero wastage of food from farm to kitchen through processing, and keeping pace with the agriculture production with the demand, and make agriculture more remunerative. It's not a subsistence one. It's more remunerative. And also, it also considered the importance of livestock in India, and also adequate feed and fodder for livestock. Some of the critical technologies that would help achieve the prerogatives which have been identified in each of the sector. So here I'm dealing with only food and nutritional security under prerogative, and they are placed under different timelines. That is, technologies that are already exist and ready for deployment, and there are some technologies here which are in the pilot scale and must be scaled up in order to move from lab to land. And there are some technologies which are in the R&D stage and which need require a targeted research. And in one column, we have placed these technologies that are still in imagination and could come to a result. These are all curiosity-driven, means blue sky research kind of a thing. And while the vision document walks towards the future, taking into consideration the country as a whole, and the offshoot of this technology vision 2035, we plan to bring out a 12 detailed technology roadmaps. And already 8 roadmaps have been released, and the other 4 roadmaps are under means preparation. Maybe by the year end, we'll be releasing those documents. And here the technology roadmap on food and nutritional security envisages, that is, state-of-the-art technologies to ensure adequate, nutritious, healthy, and safe food for growing population. So the document also projects some food grain means production, that is to the tune of 392 million tons, and also milk production. It also considers egg, fish, and what would be the requirement at the time in India. And it broadly covers status of Indian agriculture and projections for 2035, and what are the major issues and challenges we would be facing, and farmers and their needs in 2035, strategies to overcome those challenges, interrelationship between agriculture and other important sectors, means like water, soil, and maybe transportation and other sectors, and the technology perspectives and policy issues for the future. So now I'm coming back to those technologies which have been identified under Technology Vision 2035, that is food and nutritional prerogative. So here specifically, I want to explain about these technologies related to food and food technology and food biotechnology related. So these include from vertical farming to 3D printing of foods, oil to powder technologies for food. These technologies for increasing shelf life of perishable food. So here, the biofortification, which is an important area when it comes to the food microbiology, with food biotechnology, sorry. The biofortification addresses the root causes of micronutrient malnutrition, targets the poorest people, uses built-in delivery mechanisms, scientifically feasible. And the best example is golden rice. That is where the organisms, the genes have been altered to make it rich in vitamin A, thus enhancing the nutritional content of rice, which mainly contains starch. So the presence of beta carotene gives the rice a golden hue color, and it really it's one of the boon to people who want to eliminate the hidden hunger or deficiency of this vitamin A. And another agriculture approach referred to as agronomic biofortification seeks to improve the mineral content of food crops through fertilizer applications. That is a conventional method. So in India, the status is that high zinc rice, wheat, and corn, high iron and zinc pearl millet are being promoted in India with cultivation. And ICRISAT and some ICR organizations are working in these lines. Sorry, where is this? And coming back to I want to mention about this genomics and phenomics. Genomics and phenomics have applications in many fields, including medicine, biotechnology, especially in food biotechnology. So driven primarily by advances in genetics and pharmacogenomics, and the large amounts of genome and phenomic data are today being collected worldwide. Integrative analysis, mining, and computer modeling of these data facilitated by information technologies will lead to development of related disciplines. And transgenic crops, plants, and animals that already we know, BT cotton. India is the fifth largest in the world, which is having BT crops under its area. And this from just less than 50 lakh hectares to now we are almost 11.7 million hectares. That is area under BT cotton cultivation. But coming back to food crops, still a research stage. And if we consider this ethical and safety issues are addressed, then definitely they are going to be one of the means assets to remove the hunger in the country. Mm. And one of the important aspects here we identified is high value nutraceuticals and pharmaceutical products from aquatic organisms and algae. You know, India, with a coastline of 8,000 kilometers and an exclusive economic zone over for 2 million square kilometers. And with extensive marine water resources, India has great potential for development of nutraceuticals and drugs derived from these marine organisms that need to be exploited properly. However, there are some laybacks. That is, as the Indian deep sea fishing industry is not that fully equipped in terms of technology and also backup to take up these ventures by India. But now I think we should look forward to work in this area. This is the high value nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals from aquatic microorganisms. And there are some this foods interactive and smart foods. Smart foods are those which will release nutrients in response to the deficiencies detected by nanosensors. These are not purely a biotechnological aspect, but nanotechnology based component is involved. And on the more futuristic application of nanotechnology lies in production of these interactive foods and beverages that change color, flavor, or nutrients depending on the person's taste or health. And research is also being conducted to develop nanocapsules containing nutrients that would be released when nanosensors detect the vitamin deficiency in the body. Basically, this research could result in super vitamin storage systems that deliver the nutrients needed for what one requires. And some of the suggestive measures that this document, technology vision document, especially related to food and agriculture or food and nutrition security, suggests that optimal utilization of resources like water, which are very scarce, and also the prevent food losses, enhance value addition, and take measures to prolong shelf life, which is which is in the preview of this food biotechnology and value addition by indigenous processing technologies, and also this production of safe agrobiochemicals which doesn't affect the environment, and also create large-scale ecosystems in rural areas that connect farmers with knowledge and technology. And mainly this professionally managed value addition and market framework will definitely improve upon these our layback systems and also put a country in the forefront. And now coming back to this food biotechnology, as we all know, this is an important and promising research area, and which applies biotechnology to the production systems, processing, manufacturing. So develop diets based on strategies and policies to address the problems of malnutrition, including the nutrient as well as overnutrition. And this designer diets and therapeutic functional foods based on formulations for better healthcare and wholesomeness will definitely prove their might. So research efforts in food and nutritional biotechnology should aim at means basic research and high-end translational research, food and nutrition to clinical manifestation and validation of designer foods and nutritional intervention for better health and sustainable manner. So maybe all those food biotechnologies who are listening to my talk, they can follow this path for maybe helping based on your background and scale. So the future roadmap which I've shown means technology adoption and with enabling policies supported by vertical integration of all these technologies which have been mentioned will help us to achieve the sustainable food and nutritional security. And also we are also looking after this, how this environment can not be detrimental to these other means people living in cities. So the technology which we mentioned, that vertical farming, may help. And in the aftermath of this corona pandemic, you biotechnologists, food biotechnologists will hold a very big responsibility. Means bringing in all those food technologies to improve the immunity of the people and provide them safe and quality food. So with this, I just conclude my this brief presentation. Hope you may interact in the next talk. So thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That was a very informative presentation. I hope there will be some questions from the
Sure, sure, sure.
later. So yeah, at this point, I would like to switch to you, Varun, actually. Uh, so at the institute, you guys focus on plant-based and food. Could you first explain what these two concepts mean? Because I'm not sure if everybody would be familiar with it. Also, and then I would like you to go to give some insights on how this kind of food is revolutionizing the food biotech industry. Sorry, Varun, you are not audible. Your mic is mute. No, not yet. Uh, it's uh, it's mute on the software. So while Varun connects, maybe I will ask you a question, sir.
Yeah,
That
I'm so sorry. So sorry about that.
No, I
you
think
are
he's on.
yes. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I tried to make this work with two different devices, but it did not work. So my apologies for that. You can hear me
No.
well now, right?
Yes, yes, it's fine. Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Chandrakar sir, Chakradhar sir, excuse me, for that presentation. That was very fascinating, and I think there's a lot of area where we can in fact work together.
Yeah.
After 2 years of meeting each other for the first time, when I was at TIFAC for the foundation, the
Yeah.
31st foundation day, I believe it was.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
31st.
So Dr. Surabhi, really quickly, we work across different categories of food in a very exciting area, which is called alternative protein, which
Right.
is really taking the world by storm right now. And in order to dive into the categories there, I'd like to just go straight into my presentation so that
Sure.
I can take you through all the applications and the technologies involved. So I'm just going to really quickly um, do a slideshow here, and I take it this is visible to everyone, correct?
Sorry, it's getting cut by half.
Yeah, not completely visible.
Yes.
Is it? Okay, interesting.
Are you making it full screen?
Yeah, it was full screen. I'm just resharing it now again.
Sure.
Uh, Ironically enough, technology issues will not stop plaguing us during these live streams. But is this better?
It's good. Yeah, yeah.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just going to really quickly go through this entire presentation because it gives you an overview of the alternative protein sector and particularly the applications of biotechnology within it. My name is Varun Deshpande. Obviously, I run an organization called the Good Food Institute India, and we work to build the entire alternative protein sector globally from the ground up, which includes working with governments to advise on policy initiatives in this area. It includes working with businesses, business associations, investors, entrepreneurs in what we call corporate engagement to build the market for it. And then it also we also work on fundamental science in terms of we identify high impact areas of research. We sometimes fund those research areas. And then we publish a lot of materials, open access materials, etc. Our office in India, the Good Food Institute India, has 11 people. But we are in the US, Brazil, Israel, East Asia, out of Singapore, Hong Kong, and mainland China, and then Europe, out of London, Brussels, and other places. Our main question that we try and resolve is how are we going to feed nearly 10 billion people, 9.7 billion people by 2050, through systems which do not create negative impacts for the planet, right? Which do not create or exacerbate climate change, biodiversity loss, the loss of scarce natural resources, and public health crises like the one we are currently experiencing. And unfortunately, what's happening right now is not leading us in that direction, right? We currently have a food system which is not poised to navigate those crises in the future. So if you look at this slide, for example, 50% of all habitable land is already used for agriculture on the planet. The rest of it is dwindling forests and shrublands. And I think we've all seen that the Amazon has been intermittently on fire, for example, for the last 6 to 7 months, right? There was a big furor about it towards the end of last year, but now with other things that have taken over attention in the world, we're paying attention to it less and less. This is happening all over the world. Out of that agricultural land, over 3/4 is already used to feed livestock, right? And out of all of that land, all those resources, we only get 1/3 of protein. That is, meat and dairy is only 1/3 of protein supply. Obviously, when it comes to creating a more efficient food system, we have to think about these things even more in India, because we do have challenges of malnutrition that Chakradhar also mentioned earlier. We have to take into account all of these problems of iron deficiency anemia, stunting, folic acid deficiencies that result in debilitating conditions for our population. So why is all of this happening? Why do we have a food system that uses all of these resources but gives us such meager returns in terms of protein supply? The reason is very simple. We're using biological systems which are quite inefficient in terms of their yield. Animals are inefficient protein production platforms. So if you take a chicken, which is the most efficient industrially farmed, large-scale farmed animal, it takes 9 calories of input to give you 1 calorie of output in the form of flesh or meat. And chicken, as I said, is the most efficient industrially farmed animal. If you look at fish, it's about the same, but it can go to much higher depending on the fish. Pigs are worse. Cows are much, much worse than that. And it's not just the food conversion ratio, the feed conversion ratio, it's also the environmental effects, right? So if you're using 9 times as much land to grow those calories, feed them to a chicken, 9 times as much water, 9 times as many chemical inputs, you get a system where, in fact, industrial animal agriculture, or factory farming as it's called, has been identified as one of the most significant challenges to environmental health of the world, planetary health, at every scale, from big or small, large or local. It's one of the top 2 or 3 reasons for it at any level. So if we care about ocean dead zones, species loss, biodiversity loss, deforestation, greenhouse gas emissions, ocean acidification, any of these problems and myriad others, this might be an area that we would look at to optimize more and more. So for example, if you look at, as I mentioned, chickens, they release anywhere between 40 to 60 grams more carbon, 40 to 60 times more carbon dioxide per calorie of protein than lentils. So it's not only environmental and food security aspects, there are also public health issues, as we talked about a little bit, but I think these are things that are being more and more widely known over the last decades. In fact, at this point, there are even a bunch of rumors which are incorrect, right, that are floating around about the meat industry. But one thing that we do know is that there is a lot of antibiotic use at subtherapeutic levels that's involved in raising livestock. The reason for this is very simple. It's economic pressure on the companies, right? So we have to think about presenting alternatives to the companies, as well as to producers, as well as to consumers. Now, everything I'm saying is not a secret, right? All of these things have been known for decades. But the problem is, people want to eat meat, right? And the meat industry and the meat, egg, and dairy industry is an economic juggernaut because there is a demand for these things, right? They contain protein, they're delicious, they're signs of aspiration in many countries. So global meat demand has been on the rise for the last decades. That we have to discount 2020 because 2020 is going to be a very different year economically globally. But up until last year, the world was eating more meat than ever before. And in fact, if you look at what's going to happen over the next decades, the hottest zones for the growth in demand rather of poultry and milk and eggs, as Chakradhar also mentioned on his slides, the growth is going to be massive in India. So what are we going to do about this, right? Like, we have to be able to supply protein at a very large scale over the next decades. But on the other side of this equation, we have all of these issues, all of these challenges of industrial animal agriculture. So here's our theory of change in a nutshell. People want to eat meat. People want to eat eggs and dairy for all the reasons that we mentioned. We should try and supply people something that tastes the same or better and costs the same or less, but is made differently so that it doesn't have all of these negative externalities of animal-sourced foods. So that's where I come to the categories. That was a very long-winded way of answering the question that you asked me earlier, Dr. Surabhi, but these are the categories that we're talking about, right? So these categories are taking off in a very big way globally. We're talking about things like plant-based proteins, animal cell culture, and then fermentation platforms or recombinant proteins. So what is a plant-based protein? These are applications of plants to make meat, egg, and dairy analogs. I'm going to focus on meat today, but there are many other areas. So plant-based meat is a category of foods that uses plant ingredients, but has the same sensory and cultural experience of animal, conventionally farmed and slaughtered meat from animals. So I want to stress, this is not the previous generation of soya nuggets. The goal here is to perfectly replicate the sensory experience of meat. And that means that we have to think in terms of both food science as well as biotechnology.
Right.
So we're talking about taking proteins that are storage proteins, globular proteins that exist in plants because they're not meant for locomotion per se, and turning them and making them behave like animal proteins, right? And there are a lot of different techniques and different things that might be used along this value chain. But the point is that skills and technologies can be applied across the entire value chain to improve this segment. So whether it comes from crop selection all the way through to optimizing crops and ingredients that come out of it, through to the end formulation, the manufacturing, and even in the distribution, there might be opportunities. So when we speak at universities, for example, we present this mind map and we say, look, there are all of these different areas of optimization. And if you're a student who's working in these areas, please talk to us. We might think about ways in which we can create open access research together, even spin out companies into the market, really push forward the entire industry. And we're doing this all over the world. It's very exciting. To reiterate, I think that this is perhaps the most exciting time in history to be doing something like this because we have a suite of technologies and applications now which was never available before, right? So you have accelerated breeding timelines for crops, you have next generation sequencing, you have processing technologies like high moisture extrusion, shear cell technology, a lot of things that cut across the spectrum from food science to biotechnology and all these different areas, which can bring wonderful products to market that satisfy that consumer need, as I mentioned, in a way that is actually even safer than raising animals for all the reasons mentioned before. I'm going to very quickly glance over this, but the point is that, look, there's an industry here. It's growing very rapidly. The amount of investment that's been done in the last couple of years is because companies have said we are going to go many steps ahead of what has existed before. These are not veggie burgers or soy nuggets that have existed before. These are meat replacements for meat eaters. One thing to stress here is that perhaps the most promising or untapped markets are all the emerging markets, right? So India is front and center there as an opportunity. There are many, many ways that we can capitalize on our agri-biodiversity, our various agroclimatic zones. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to working with, for example, TIFAC to map out these opportunities in India and take things forward with the talent pool that we have. So the second category that I mentioned therein was animal cell culture, what's known as cultivated meat. This is a very simple concept. The idea is instead of farming animals and growing all those parts of the animal that we don't need, which is what results in the wastage in food security terms. When you're feeding the chicken 9 calories in and getting 1 calorie out, it's because it's a living, breathing, metabolizing organism that is also growing beak and feathers and a lot of the parts of the animal that we don't need, right? So what we're talking about with cultivated meat is essentially taking cells from an animal and then growing the animal in a manufacturing facility without needing to do all of the other steps involved in between. So what this means is, of course, in India, it would not be beef because that's not a meat that's eaten in India. It would be chickens or fish or mutton or different types of meat that we would like to eat in India. It involves taking the specific cell type that you need. It involves the proliferation of those cell types, then differentiation into fat, muscle, etc. And then you get the final product that is of interest, right? Similarly, we also have a mind map for how we can advance all of these different areas. So we're talking about the cell lines themselves. As I said, you might need a cell line from a chicken. or a specific type of fish or seafood that you want, or a mutton, in order to grow that specific animal or the meat of that specific animal. If you want to seed a 3D cut of meat, you might look at a scaffolding structure, right? And those could be food grade. So they could be made from alginate or other things that are already used in food, or they could be made biodegradable and come in from the biotech industry. You need basically growth factors and cell culture in order to grow that and differentiate it into the type of meat that you need. And then finally, you need the environment inside which you're growing it, which is the fermenter or the cultivator, or what is, as everyone knows in biotech or bioengineering, a bioreactor, right? That's what you need. Really, to quickly to give you a sense of how fast or rapid the progress has been in this industry, in 2013, Dr. Mark Post in the Netherlands came out with the first research project where he had grown a lamb burger and he cooked and ate it live on TV. And the research project was about 330,000 US dollars. So of course, in the media, it came out as, look, this is a $330,000 burger,
Yeah.
right? We know that that's not true. That's what the research cost. But let's put a pin in that for a second. In 2015, towards the end of 2015, the first company focused in this area called Memphis Meats in the US was formed by an Indian-born US emigrated founder, Dr. Uma Valetti. And Uma has met with Dr. Ranjan as well on his last visit to India. Now what we're looking at in 2020 is about 60 companies in this space, right? So if you look at the end of 2015, there were only 5 companies, right, in the center of the screen here. And you'll see Memphis Meats on the bottom there. I want to highlight next to Memphis Meats is a company called Mosa Meat. That company is started by the same Dutch researcher, Dr. Mark Post. And instead of making a $330,000 lamb burger, they're actually making internally these burgers for a cost basis of about $10 to $12. So the point is to illustrate that, look, when things go from research to pilot scale, the cost is brought drastically down. And there's a lot of complexity involved even beyond that to take it from pilot scale to manufacturing scale. That's where really all of these companies are looking. I want to highlight also that all of these companies, not all of them obviously, but a significant portion of these companies have Indians or expat Indians or second generation Indians settled abroad who are really driving forward their companies. So we expect that we might experience something of a reverse brain drain, right? In terms of people who might want to invest in India, either with those same companies coming to India for manufacturing, right? Or leaving those companies, coming back, founding their own companies, or doing inorganic investments once they make money abroad in other companies here that are pushing forward the industry. Because that's really what's driving these founders, is they want to make the world a better place by making meat without all the negative implications of it. The last category that I mentioned was fermentation. Fermentation is not a secret to any biotechnology student. It's not a secret to anyone in the world, really. It's a thousands of years old production platform, so to speak. It's used in making bread. Really bread, beer, etc. Really one of the important things to remember here is fermentation is vast and well established. The protocols are well established, but its application in this sector is new. So when we talk about fermentation, we're talking about 2 different types of products. We're talking about growth by fermentation of whole biomass of things like, sorry, I'll just go back one slide. So if you see on the bottom here, we're looking at different types of organisms that are being used, right? We're talking about algae, we're talking about fungi, we're talking about filamentous fungi specifically. And really these are different types of organisms that have been eaten in different proportions in different cultures over time. They really are kind of prehistoric co-inhabitants on this planet, right? So that's one area, is growing the whole biomass of these ingredients and then utilizing them in end products. And then the second thing is we can utilize them as production platforms, right, for recombinant proteins or other areas. Yeah, and I just wanted to highlight also that basically fermentation has been used for a very long time in the food industry also. The enzymes that come out for food processing specifically include things like chymosin or vegetarian rennet, which are used to mature cheese, for example. It's also used to manufacture amino acids in very, very large quantities. And in fact, amino acids then go into the animal feed industry. So we've already been eating the products of these production platforms for a very long time. To give you a breakdown of, this is obviously fermentation is a very vast area. So just to give you a breakdown of those 2 categories that I mentioned. On the whole biomass side, there are many companies that are bringing products to market. right? So there are some of them that are utilizing fungi, as I mentioned, or algae. Um, the category of fungi is being called mycoprotein. The category of algae is yet to emerge, but we'll see a lot going on there. On the other side, or when it comes to functional proteins that are produced usually recombinantly, if you look at the top there, dairy, Perfect Day, again, is a company that's making beta-lactoglobulin is their product, right? They make dairy proteins that would normally be consumed from cow's milk, but they make it using recombinant production platforms. That's a company that's raised $140 million. Again, two Indian founders, one of whom emigrated from India to the US very recently. Yeah, and I just wanted to say also that what's happening here is, what's happening here is we're seeing actually that uh, products in this space will not actually fit very discreetly into one of these buckets in the future, right? Just like ingredients in food generally come from different areas, right? So like when I said earlier, cheese, that is cow's cheese, dairy cheese, regular dairy cheese is actually matured a lot using enzymes that come from other industries, right? Like rennet or whatever.
Yeah.
We're seeing the same thing happen here. So within fermentation, you will see a lot of, just like as I mentioned in cultivated meat and in plant-based meat, there are opportunities for optimization, driving down costs, getting better products over time. You'll see a lot of optimization in the strain development of, let's say, a mycoprotein, or in the feedstock valorization, so you get a more efficient end process, or even in generally scaling up. So that we're seeing a lot of opportunity and promise across this area as well. And largely, I think what we're going to experience is we're going to experience basically a new food or a new feed industry where you're seeing different ingredients that are coming from different parts of plants, different fermentation-based ingredients, and perhaps different inputs for different production platforms. That's how we get this spectrum of products at the end of all of this. You can have something that's fully plant-based and a previous generation product like a tofu, which has obviously been made for a very, very long time. You can have what's known as the Impossible Burger, a very famous plant-based product which uses one fermentation-derived ingredient. You can have over time hybrid products of plant-based and animal cell culture, where you might take the plant-based ingredients largely and then just add cultivated fats. So only the fats that come from animal cultivation, animal cell cultivation, which might give you a mouthfeel or a taste that's perfect. And then ultimately you might have fully synthetic or fully cultivated products like gelatin or collagen, et cetera, that could come from different production platforms. Just to close out, I wanted to say that this is a huge opportunity globally. We're seeing a lot of noise, a lot of investment, a lot of growth. 9 out of the top 10 US meat producers, and we all know that the US eats the most meat in the world, 9 out of the top 10 US meat producers have invested or started their own lines of plant-based meat, for example. So what I'm describing to you is not science fiction. It's not in the future. It's happening right now, right? And it demands a lot of talent from places like DYPIU over the next years in India. But all of the noise, all of the progress that's been made has happened on a shoestring budget, absolutely nothing compared to other similar industries in different sectors. So if you look at clean energy, for example, it takes roughly 300 to 400 billion with a B dollars of investment every year, right? Across industry investment and R&D. And why? The answer is very simple, right? Because it tackles all of these problems in theory. So since clean energy tackles all of the same problems, and clean meat or plant-based fermentation-derived cultivated meat targets some of the same problems, probably we should look at some kind of parity over time emerging in these areas. And we're very interested in seeing what happens. Of course, we're working with people across the spectrum who can help us do that. But if we're able to succeed, then we get to a space where you get this incredibly exciting industry over time, which has a tiny fraction of the footprint, is able to feed a much larger population in the world and deliver essential ingredients and nutrients and end products and all of these things that people crave and love and need, but which is far better in terms of its implications for the planet. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't overstep the time by too much, but I'd be happy to take any questions now about what it is that we do and how we can work together.
Sorry. Yeah. So that was a great presentation, Varun. Very informative for the future of where the food might go. And so actually, so there's a major overlap between what both of you spoke actually, is that how uh, generally in India we are trying to solve so Dr. Chakradhar spoke about how policy making would be is generally focusing on solving the food shortage and storage issues, and then
Yeah.
and even Varun, you spoke about how the alternative protein can be a solution to the existing food problems that we have generally all over the world. So maybe I would like to get a take from each of you, Dr. Chakradhar, from your point of view, that how which sectors of biotechnology, food biotechnology, you think are going to help into solving this shortage issues, and then I will come to you later, Varun, about how you think that this food, first of all, how long do you think that this would take to come into the market? And then second of all, uh, do you think this can solve the food shortage issues? Yeah, so Dr. Chakradhar, first you.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to appreciate Varun for the very informative presentation. And just to supplement that, yesterday I was going through some news article where Israeli-based company, maybe Redefine Meat, they have come up with a similar kind of meat from plant-based ingredients, and it is having the similar feel, taste, and mouthfulness, etc. Just to supplement that, and really very informative presentation, Varun. And yes, Surabhi, Dr. Surabhi, coming back to your question, that the major problem of food shortage and storage in some parts of the country and the world, and how we, the food biotechnology, will overcome that. So the hunger and food insecurity is a recurring problem in most parts of the developing world, especially. And so increasing production, improved harvest, improved storage, and food processing. So there's, I think Varun gave half of my answer by his presentation, because by incorporating this non-traditional foods, kind of a thing like algae, other there's fungi-based foods into the mainstreaming. So definitely they are going to help us in overcoming the problems which we have. And obviously, biotechnology can be used in many ways to achieve these higher yields of the produce. And this protein content of both staples in low and other components that can be enhanced, where if you consume the less quantity also, but nutritionally they'll supplement. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe in those lines, if you improve the nutrition content of the produce, so definitely it'll going to help us in overcoming this problem of this food shortage and hunger and etc. And coming back to this storage, this improved storage. Storages would not exist in many countries if the problem of post-harvest losses have been contained.
Right, right.
That's my, even India, we are facing a lot of problem in
Yeah.
this food losses. So just microbial reactions by these toxins developed by these all contaminants will spoil foods in a very shorter period, so that before the transportation and in the storage itself. So if you overcome that by the use of this food biotechnology, that is improving, eliminating those allergens or toxin compounds or which may deteriorate the food components. So definitely the shelf life and storage content. And the best example is the flavor saver tomato. There is a classic example
Yeah.
where the shelf life of this vegetables, the tomato has been increased, and it is one of the proven fact. And this coming back to this processing. So since proteins and vitamins are often lost in the traditional food processing, fermentation process, as Varun explained, may offer a big, means good opportunity in tackling those problems. So by the application of food biotechnology, definitely we are going to overcome the shortage, food shortage and storage problems.
Right.
Those are my observations.
Right, right. Thank you, sir. So,
Okay.
so yeah, Varun, so yeah, just to remind you of my questions, how long do you think these alternative protein options will take to come to the market, first of all? And then second of all, can they actually solve the food shortage issues? I mean, are they projected to be that big?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the questions in reverse. When it comes to food shortages, the reason that we work on this specific problem, I already mentioned some of it earlier, which is that you just pick your reason, right? Like if we're talking about food security, we're talking about climate change, talking about antimicrobial resistance, pandemics, all of those problems. This is a central node that is industrial livestock production. I'm not talking about small scale regenerative agriculture, etc. I'm talking about the industrialization, which increases the risk and all of those things, right?
Right.
If we're going to feed 10 billion people by 2050 with all the protein demands, the meat demands, all of those things, unfortunately, small scale regenerative agriculture will not solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
So we have to
Yeah.
present an alternative to industrialized animal agriculture, which is why what we're doing. We're talking about needing 50 to 70% more meat production by 2050. It's
Right.
simply not possible. So I would argue, at this point, we have to think in terms of a paradigm shift, not incremental gains. That's why we're working on this problem. As far as are they projected to be able to solve that, there's a lot of work to do, a lot of work. Because when I showed you those value chains,
Right.
we're talking about the creation of an industry that can provide an alternative, a transition away from a $4 trillion industry that already exists, which is animal meat, right?
Yeah.
And if you add
Yeah.
eggs and dairy and all of those things, it becomes closer to $10 trillion, right?
Right.
That's a huge shift, and we have to do it very quickly. The clock is ticking. I mean, we would argue that it's not even ticking. Like the implications are already here, right? The implications of
Right.
climate change, of pandemics, and all of that. As far as when are they coming to market, so plant-based and fermentation-based are already on the market, right? So if you look internationally, I mentioned one company called Impossible Foods, which makes the Impossible Burger. They've been out for many years. If you look at another company which also makes burgers called Beyond Meat, that
Right.
company is publicly listed on the New York Stock Exchange, right? All of these companies have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. There's another company called Just, based out of San Francisco, which makes plant-based eggs from mung beans. The goal there again is the same. They should perform exactly like eggs. They should taste like eggs, but without all of these negative implications. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's already emerged that's on the market, and it will continue to grow. The one category that's still emerging that will take some time is animal cell culture. So cultivated meat will take some time because of cost as well as because of regulatory implications. So I think we're getting there. We're getting very close to the point where all of these things are becoming reality, and it'll happen in India as well. We're seeing, coronavirus has put a stop to some of these things, but we are expecting several product launches from the entrepreneurs with whom we work. We work with dozens of entrepreneurs in India also, helping them with a lot of things like product development, go-to-market, hiring, all of those things. We expect some very exciting launches over the next year or so.
Right. So yeah, there's another issue that most of the food biotechnologists face is of maintaining the quality of the food, and then how. So what kind of policies, or rather, how I would like to get into this side that maybe Dr. Chakradhar, you can speak about uh, how biotechnology can help in maintaining the quality.
Yeah, plus coming back to quality, just means in India being a tropical country, it's been a problem. So
Right.
over the period, yeah, and industry and food companies, they have generally adopted this quality assurance system based on the principles of hazard analysis, critical control point. This is the HACCP concept. But this food biotechnology largely aims at improving food quality and taste. Like this, now the functional or medicinal foods are those possessing health promoting or disease preventing properties beyond the supply of nutrients. This includes vitamins, minerals, oil, and so the quality is very well maintained in these therapeutics and other areas. But
Right.
for other foods, there need to be packaging issues and the transporting issues. Even if you take all care during the manufacturing or the processing period, but maybe they get contaminated during the transportation or maybe during the storage. So maybe if we overcome those things, so definitely at the production end, biotechnology, the food biotechnology is already taking care of it. And the new sciences, that is proteomic approaches, are widely being used in microbiology and food biotechnology. And this biopreservation of food by bacteriocins, bacteriophages, and endolysins is on the vogue. So, but contrary, this developments in the this food microbiology and advancements in the new molecular based techniques, it is going to prove they might. And in future, definitely the food biotechnology will help us in overcoming these quality issues.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, speaking about quality, there's a big concern, Varun, about the animal tissue based, or rather lab grown meat, is that the serum that is used for it is animal based right now, and for for that you need to actually kill the animal. So are people trying to actually think of alternatives or come up with solutions which would lead to saving these animals, because that's one of the reasons why this kind of meat is being produced?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that's a very close to being a solved problem, in fact. So
All right.
what you're saying that it currently comes from animals is, it has not been true for a couple of years now, because many
Okay.
of the companies that are entering the space are entering it for the reason that you described, which is for food safety reasons, for cost reasons, for predictability reasons, optimization reasons, for and of course for animal welfare. It makes no sense to get culture media from animals and then grow
Right.
cultivated meat, right? Makes no sense. So the goal has always been to optimize, cell culture media from non-animal slaughter sources. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
that's an interesting proposition because it might be a big cost driver at scale, right?
Right.
The thing is, cell culture media, as a lot of biotechnology students would know. I myself was a cell culture intern in a lab in university. I was not a very good one. But we all know that you basically source a lot of the components at food grade, right? So sugar, salt, amino acids, the things that are needed, that are basic. But then you have signaling molecules, which are usually
Mm-hmm.
proteins, which are
Yes.
more expensive, because that's what's telling the cells, as it does inside the body. It's telling the cells to differentiate into a certain type of muscle cell or a certain type of fat cell or whatever, right? Um, those are the components that I think are going to take a lot of time. And by the way, this is where India and companies in India, which has a strong tradition of biotechnology manufacturing, at least in even in things like generics and pharmaceuticals, but also in biopharmaceuticals, recombinant proteins, etc. That's where companies in India come to the fore. What we can do in countries like India is drive down the cost of this industry globally once we get
Mm-hmm.
involved in a big way. So, the Biocons, Dr. Reddy's, Cipla's, Rich Course Life Sciences, all of these companies are the ones that will come to the forefront. And that's what we work on, is to stimulate their involvement. So we have a global cultivated meat modeling consortium, which is based in the Netherlands. It's a collaborative exercise among some companies, GFI being a convener there, and then some universities, etc., where we are modeling out how to drive down the cost of cell culture media by orders of magnitude, utilizing
Right.
different techniques and different inputs.
Right. Okay. That's great that there's already a solution for it, because the last I was reading about it is that people were still using animal-based serum. So I mean, at least in experiment lab, people still use that. So it would
Yeah.
be very useful to actually find an alternative, even for the labs where people are culturing tissue tissue or animal
Yeah,
cells for other
Animals.
purposes, I mean experimental purposes. So even a
yeah.
replacement over there would be very
Can
useful.
I quickly
So
respond to that, if you don't mind?
I'm sorry.
Can I quickly respond to that, if you don't mind?
Yes, yes, of course, yes.
Yeah, sorry. So I was just saying, yeah, I mean, the thing is, at the lab scale, there are very many things that happen which are different than when you transition away from the lab, right? And a lot of things
Right.
start in the lab, but this is why we don't call it lab grown meat, because the
Mm-hmm.
implications at a lab scale are very different. We call it
Right.
cultivated meat because it very quickly leaves the lab and goes into, we're trying to apply a food lens to what was a biotech process, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when it goes into food and scale up, and it really acquires a different dimension altogether. Like, for example, at lab scale, antibiotics are sometimes used to keep cells alive, right, for
Yeah.
cell culture protocol.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that cannot be done. That cannot be done at industrial manufacturing scale.
Of
You do
course.
not want that. You want to monitor all the off spec parameters, all the inputs. You want to make sure everything is totally safe, and that actually makes it a very interesting, more safe proposition than animal meat. Because think about it, inside a bioreactor, I can monitor pretty much every off-spec parameter or whatever is happening inside there. But I cannot go to every body of every animal that is being raised and slaughtered and check whether they have some disease or whatever. And that's how you get problems like African swine fever, avian flu, swine flu. I mean, that there's just a myriad problems with raising livestock relative to this, right? So that's why we're so excited about this area as well.
Right, right. It's great. Yeah, I'm repeating myself that it's great that you have a solution already. So yeah, I mean, getting back to the policy making. So sir, you mentioned since we began with the fact that the document technology vision was written in 2015, and then it has been actually
2016 it was
actually
released.
sorry.
2016 it was released. It was dedicated to
Okay.
the nation.
Yeah. So it basically lays a roadmap for next 20 years or 19, 20 years. So how far do you think we have come from what you had predicted in 2016? And which of these sectors do you think would actually develop more?
Especially related to this food and
Food biotech,
agriculture.
yeah.
Yeah, most of the findings which have been recommended in the Technology Vision 2035 document have been taken up by the government, and they are being included in the line ministries departments. They are taking into consideration, but effective implementation still it's in process. So maybe
Mhm.
it will take time to come into fruition. And this in coming back to this food and food biotechnology related, as we all know, this food biotechnology is an important and promising research field that applies biotechnology to production, processing, manufacturing, and everything of stuff. And it also includes the age-old the biotechnological process, as the Varun mentioned, the fermentation, brewing, and all those things. So this modern biotechnology to improve the genes related to production, processing, and quality of food produce, high quality agriculture products, manufacturing of food additives, and cultivate plant and animal cells to access this food in a functional ingredient, basically to extract this functional ingredient, and other biotechnological related to food processing and manufacturing, such as this enzyme engineering, protein engineering, and evolutionary engineering. And these are the areas as food and nutrition is expanding rapidly. In the Western world, major strategy is to make diets nutritionally more rewarding, is through improved food processing and technology-oriented high-end research on mechanisms related to basically addressing the health and health issues. But in India, the solutions need to be different because of nearly our this food processing industry is at nascent stage. Maybe now with government, a lot of promotion policies, lot many this means putting up cold storages. There are a lot many schemes from the Ministry of Food Processing, which is taking up now rapidly. And these are all need to keep the costs down low, seeing our the community and welfare, and the differences in effectiveness of this fortification approaches due to the problems unique to our genetical makeup of the India and the disease burden we have. So there are a lot many issues which need to be tackled at the technology and at the policy, and all the stakeholders need to look into it. And issue specific to one of the important thing is vegetarian.
Right.
Predominantly, the Indians are vegetarians. Maybe the Varun's there's veg meat will means help us in overcoming this protein deficiency issues. So, in nutshell, I wanted to tell research efforts in food and nutrition biotechnology should open a broad horizon of especially the capacity building and knowledge development, which I think by starting the one of the means innovative course started by DYPIU International University, that is food engineering, that's biotech engineering, and this component of food biotechnology. So that is one aspect. And the research area should span from the basic research to high-end the translational research in the area of food biotechnology, and addressing the clinical manifestation and validation of the designer foods or any new things which come into the market. So basically, everything if it goes and considering the safety and ethical issues and continued and produced in a sustainable manner, definitely the means food biotechnology is going to be one of the means most sought after area. That's thank you.
Thank you, sir. So that was that lays a good picture at least for future. And so since we are talking about food so much, and since we spoke so much about alternative proteins, I have a very naive question for you, Varun. Is that when we talk about these alternative proteins, or let's say when we talk about alternative food, we generally talk more about protein. Uh, what is happening on the side of carbohydrate, fats, vitamins, because vitamins are also very important nutrient sections which is generally missing in our food, especially vitamin D, let's say.
Yeah, I want to address that because, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, in my presentation, we have to consider the specific considerations of India and the developing world when we're talking about the application of technology to food. And we do have, as Dr. Chakradhar also mentioned just now, we do have protein energy malnutrition, and I mentioned deficiencies of micronutrients, etc. So I'm glad you brought it up. At least in our sector, people are very mindful of this. Even though up until this point, a lot of the application of these technologies has been in a Western context where people are already eating a lot of meat, right?
Right.
So it's an easier commercial proposition to say, look, people are already eating a lot of meat. In fact, in America, Americans eat 3 beef burgers a week on average.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that is really bad for the planet. So it's an easy business proposition. Consumers are converging on the idea of eating for the planet, right? Like people are very on top of this idea now that sustainability is a huge piece of how we want to live our lives moving forward. So up until this point, it's been this idea of replacing what's already being eaten. But if we apply a lens of developing world context to these problems and we say, look, technology gives us a tool to solve those problems of farmers'
Mhm.
incomes, of malnutrition, then we get something which I think is truly magical, right? Like
Right.
then you get to the point where you are saying we will not compromise on nutritional parameters also.
Of
Just
course.
the just the biomimicry of taste and sensory and cultural experience is not enough, right? It's great that
Hmm.
Americans have the opportunity to do a backyard barbecue or a baseball game with the sausage and a burger, etc. But in India, we have equally urgent problems of malnutrition. So if we're talking about, let's say, an urban slum where you
Hmm.
go in and talk to a family of 4 and they will tell you, we are currently spending 460 rupees a week on one mutton meal for our family of 4 every week. If we could, we would spend 920 rupees a week for 2 mutton meals. Why? Because it's aspirational. It brings people together. We enjoy it. Um, Overall, it's very enjoy. Overall, it's a wonderfully positive thing for our lives. So we have to be able to cater to everyone at every level of the income pyramid and be able to put that nutrition lens on it. So I think that's definitely a distinct possibility. As far as carbohydrates, etc., are concerned, I think that this problem of animal production, if we're able to tackle it to a certain degree and do a protein transition, some of the
Hmm.
other things also get solved to a certain degree. Because if we're using 77% of agricultural land to grow crops for animals or to graze animals, we can free up a huge proportion of that land by taking animals out of the equation,
Right.
right? Then we can grow whatever we want on that land in terms of carbohydrates, etc. I think one big transition also that is in fact happening right now is the transition to more climate smart agriculture, regardless
Hmm.
of whether you're talking about our sector or not. So even as
Yeah.
a general movement, the movement towards or back towards millets and pulses, etc., is a very positive one. I think that the application of science and biotechnology there will be a true game changer. So, for example, applying let's say next generation sequencing, genomic trait mapping, trait selection, looking at looking at pulses that have slightly better macronutrient and micronutrient expression. Um, it really gives you a possibility that's endless. So wheat flour has been a dominant ingredient in the snack industry and in the food industry over the last decades.
Yeah.
We might be able to look at making millets and pulses even more attractive, um, while still retaining their climate smart nature and their nutritive nature, such that we get a much better food system overall, right? So even in our
Sure.
snacks, our chips, our biscuits, we should be able to do all of that on the carbohydrate side as well. And it's happening, which is great.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad people are working in that direction as well, because that's another, especially vitamins are one of the most important problems to be solved while we are solving the protein issues. So,
And
so yeah, I think Sorry, you were speaking something.
Surabhi, as Varun mentioned about climate smart agriculture, yes, I'm glad to inform you that the TIFAC has already started a project on this climate smart agriculture. And
Yes,
this
yes.
approach, this climate smart agriculture is one of the approach which has been identified by the Technology Vision 2035 document.
Yes, sir. So I had read a bit of the Technology Vision 2035, and I had come across this. I did not go into that direction because that would have been too much to discuss actually.
Sure.
So, but yeah, maybe in one or two sentences, you can explain to the students what climate smart agriculture means.
So basically, it works on the principles of three concepts. That is adaptation. This means this especially the agriculture, because in high ends, agriculture cannot go for the mitigation aspects, because especially in India, because seeing the background of the farmers, because most of them are small holders, small landholders, and also, and one of the other pillar is the sustainability aspect. So considering all these aspects, so how you bring about it's a multi-pronged approach. Climate smart agriculture is a multi-pronged approach, maybe resource conservation, integrated farming, and taking livestock into consideration. So all these aspects will be considered for a sustainable agriculture, which is giving more remuneration to the farmers. So in those lines, just we initiated the project. Let's hope that will take carry forward and for the benefit of farming community, and simultaneously, because farmers are the people who will supply the raw material to the food industry.
Yeah.
Maybe it will offshoot. It will also means maybe help in improvement of this food industry. That's
Right. Right. So yeah, we have
If I can just,
crossed our. Yes, sorry, Varun, you were speaking.
yes.
I just wanted to add one thing, that one of the
Yeah.
most powerful levers for climate smart agriculture is thinking very simply in terms of what to produce.
Right.
Management practices and specific types of farming and specific types of irrigation and organic and all of those things are great,
Yeah.
but
Mhm.
the most important and the orders of magnitude more important lever right now that we can pull is what are
Right.
we going to produce, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I'll give you an example. Something like 12 to 15% of agricultural output in Maharashtra is sugarcane and rice.
Mhm.
Something like 50 to 60% of agricultural water use in Maharashtra is sugarcane and rice, right?
Right.
So like it's overwhelmingly orders of magnitude more effective to try and move farmers over from sugarcane and rice
Mhm.
to something that is much more easy to produce, given that it's possible, if it is indeed possible to do that, given the agroclimatic zone, etc. If we can do pulses and millets and things like that, which are much better in terms of water
There's a
use,
mixed cropping.
yeah, or even mixed cropping, that all of that would be great. But we have to think in terms of the market mechanism also, right? Just convincing a farmer to grow millets without being able to sell it into a market and get income for
Yeah.
it is not possible, right? That's why one of the things that we think at the Good Food Institute India is super promising is from now only, let's focus on millet-based applications in plant-based meat, egg, and dairy, so that there is a clear market for those farmers to sell into, for value-added products to be made and realize the value themselves, right? Pocket
Of
the
course.
value of it themselves. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. In fact, one of the
Yeah.
things that is holding back the transformation is the creation of that market. You can't have it be a
Right.
commodity, because then there's no incentive for a farmer to change over. You're just asking someone who is already a vulnerable population to
Mhm.
just make a change, put in the capital themselves to make the change their practices, and then not get any value out of it. Makes no sense. So
True.
there are
True.
many problems to solve, but lots of promising
Yeah.
opportunities too.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Especially related to food and agriculture. Since I mean, even though we are a agriculture-based country, there's a lot of problems to be solved.
Yeah.
That's definitely true. So yeah, at this point, maybe we can take some questions from the students. There's a very interesting question about if there's a possibility of edible vaccines. So I'm not sure if either of you would be interested to answer that.
Not my
Yeah.
area, unfortunately. I would defer to Dr. Chakradhar here.
No, means already some research is going on for these edible vaccines. Maybe it's in banana and the citrus,
Mhm.
especially for this overcoming in citrus is overcoming this our flu kind of symptoms. So already the research is going on. Maybe University of Reading in UK. So they are carrying out this research of developing this edible vaccines.
So that you say that that would come directly from the plant?
Yeah, it is the same similar kind of this gene manipulation and other things, where
Okay,
you introduce a specific gene from a microbe or a kind of organism to into the plant, which will produce again this fruits and all other the edible part. So when
right.
you consume that edible part, maybe the protein component
Mm-hmm.
which enters into our body will act as a vaccine. It's
Okay,
a
okay.
very similar kind of one, but it's still in a research stage.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe
I mean,
it's
but
like
I'm glad people are thinking about it.
maybe food biotechnologists can think of to overcome the problem of this coronavirus. Maybe it's just so good if the edible vaccine is available to control the corona.
Definitely, yes. It would be great to have vaccines which can be eaten and not injected, because a lot of people don't like injections.
Yeah.
So I'll go to the next question, which is for you, I think, Varun. Is that the production of meat from plant and actual meat cost the same, or they vary at the moment?
So interestingly enough, as I mentioned, the inputs for growing or for producing rather a plant-based meat product are all much more efficient than a
Mm-hmm.
animal product. So even though currently we're in the early stages of an industry and some of the products might be more expensive, over time it becomes very rapidly cheaper. So to give you an example, Impossible Foods, the US-based company that is making the beef burger, um, they started off at a very expensive level. So Michelin starred restaurants, very fancy restaurants. And then very quickly, within 6 months, 8 months, they moved to fast food level prices, which is quite cheap in a place like the US. So over time, we expect that it'll become much, much cheaper. There are companies in India that are putting out products that are price competitive with a mutton or a chicken or even an egg, which is very
Mm-hmm.
cheap. Over time, I think those companies will make better products. So, there might be some price fluctuation, but as an industry on the whole, especially with the huge companies getting involved, as I said, we think that over time, this is going to be much more cost competitive relative to now. It'll be even cheaper than animal meat over time.
Right. And I think so. Taking forward from there, there's another question which is related to it. Is that so? I, the student is very much interested in protein supplements. So he's asking that they are already very expensive. So how much will alternate protein source will cost to average consumer?
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, it's worth noting that protein supplements themselves are not, it depends on which one. If we're talking about whey protein, then, a lot of it is imported, interestingly enough, even though we have such a thriving dairy industry in India. So, a lot of that cost comes from the importing and the branding and all of those things. As far as production, as I say, alternative protein will relentlessly move downwards in cost basis so that over time it'll become very competitive with animal meat. But I mean, I want to stress that a lot of what I'm describing will happen over the course of a decade, right?
Right.
So if I were a biotechnology student or a food science student, I would look at entering the space now, and because the opportunity is all now in terms of the unaddressed areas, etc. And what we get at the end of that, let's say our own technology vision 2030 or 2035 will take us in the direction of that cost parity and a thriving market, different types of products, different types of companies, and I think that we're going to see something really special, but it'll take time to get there.
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned that that the entire process would take another let's say a decade or something, and then based on that, of course, students have to prepare now. I mean, whoever is entering into the field now, this is the field that or these are the avenues that they should be thinking about generally, because these are kind of not just upcoming anymore, they are still developing. So it's the best time to actually enter into such kind of fields which are developing, because by the time you actually start working on it, they would be upcoming. So so that makes their life easier eventually. So for the lack of time, I would we would wrap up now. It was great talking to both of you, Dr. Chakradhar and Varun.
Yeah,
And I'm sure students also found it a very interesting session to actually talk to or listen to both of you about different aspects of food biotechnology and how things would be changing in future. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Surabhi. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Thanks for spending your Saturday evening with us, Dr.
Yeah.
Surabhi, and everyone who's watching.
Yeah, be safe. And I would like
Take
to
care.
also thank Professor Ranjan for giving this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a pleasure of
Thank you,
everyone to
everyone.
listen to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care.